The desert wind had finally grown still. For 40 years, it had carried the dust of wandering across the faces of a people who had once walked out of slavery with trembling hope. It had howled against their tents, swept across their campfires, and whispered over fresh graves in the wilderness. An entire generation had risen, aged, and fallen beneath that endless sky. Now the journey stood at its final threshold. Moses, the servant of the Lord, had climbed the rugged slopes of Mount Nebo alone. His hair was white, yet his eyes were clear. His strength had not failed him, though the years had been heavy with responsibility. From the summit, the Lord showed him the land, rolling hills drenched in golden light, valleys lush with promise, the winding ribbon of the Jordan River cutting through fertile plains. Cities stood in the distance, fortified and proud. It was everything God had sworn to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses saw it, but he would not step into it. Because at Meribah, when the people thirsted and quarreled, he had struck the rock in anger instead of speaking to it as God had commanded. A moment of frustration had cost him entrance into the promise. And so the servant of God closed his eyes on the mountain, and the Lord himself buried him. For 30 days Israel wept. They mourned the prophet who had faced Pharaoh, who had lifted his staff over the Red Sea and watched waters stand like walls, who had descended Sinai with the fire of heaven reflected in his eyes. They mourned the man who had interceded for them when they worshipped a golden calf, who had pleaded for mercy when judgment threatened to consume them. When the mourning ended, silence settled over the camp, and into that silence stepped Joshua. He had stood in Moses' shadow for decades, faithful, observant, patient. As a young man, he had climbed partway up Sinai while Moses entered the cloud of glory. He had remained at the tent of meeting long after others departed. He had once crossed into Canaan as a spy and returned with fruit so large it required 2 men to carry it on a pole. He remembered the fear. 12 spies had explored the land. 10 returned with trembling voices. The cities were fortified. The inhabitants were giants. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, they had said. But Joshua and Caleb had stood firm. If the Lord delights in us, Joshua had declared before the assembly, he will bring us into this land. The people had chosen fear, and fear had condemned them to wander until every doubting voice fell silent in the sand. Now Joshua stood before their children. The Jordan River lay ahead, swollen with spring floods, churning and wild. Beyond it, like a sentinel of stone, stood Jericho. Its walls were thick, layered, towering. Homes were built into its structure. Its gates were iron-bound and guarded day and night. No army had broken it in living memory. Then the word of the Lord came. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land I am giving to them. Joshua's heart pounded. The voice continued, steady and commanding. Be strong and courageous. Again, be strong and very courageous. A third time, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua understood the weight of repetition. He had seen what fear could do to a nation. Courage was not a suggestion, it was survival. But the Lord attached a condition. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left. Victory would not come from strategy alone. It would flow from obedience. Joshua turned to the officers. Prepare provisions. In 3 days we cross the Jordan. Before the crossing, he sent 2 men quietly toward Jericho.
They slipped across the river under cover of darkness and entered the city through its gates, blending among traders and travelers. They sought refuge in the house of a woman named Rahab. Her home clung to the city wall itself, its window opening outward over the plains. Strangers could enter her door without suspicion. She had lived a life shaped by compromise, survival, and quiet shame. Men came and went, but none stayed. She knew the rhythms of secrecy. But that night, secrecy carried a different weight. Word reached the king. Israelite spies were inside the city. Soldiers pounded at her door. Rahab's pulse thundered in her ears. The spies were already hidden on her roof, beneath stalks of flax laid out to dry. She opened the door. "Yes, the men came to me," she said, steadying her voice, "but I did not know where they were from. They left at dusk, just as the gate was about to close. If you hurry, you may catch them." It was a lie. The soldiers rushed toward the Jordan. The gates slammed shut behind them. Under the night sky, Rahab climbed to her roof. The two men rose from their hiding place, eyes wide with urgency. Before they could speak, she did. "I know that the Lord has given you this land," she said softly. Her confession trembled with sincerity. "We have heard how your God dried up the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. We have heard what you did to the kings beyond the Jordan. When we heard of it, our hearts melted. No courage remains in anyone because of you." She looked toward the temple towers of Jericho, where idols stood lifeless in stone. "For the Lord your God," she whispered, "He is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath." Faith bloomed in a heart no one expected. She possessed no scroll of the law, no prophet had taught her. She possessed only rumor, stories carried on trade routes and whispered in marketplaces. But she believed. "Swear to me," she pleaded, "that as I have shown kindness to you, you will show kindness to my family. Spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters. Save us from death." The spies exchanged glances. "Our lives for yours," they vowed, "but you must gather your family into this house, tie a scarlet cord in this window. Anyone inside will be spared, anyone outside will bear their own fate, and you must not reveal our mission." Rahab agreed. That night she lowered them by rope through her window. The cord strained against their weight as they descended the wall. She directed them toward the hills to hide for 3 days. When she closed the window, she took a length of scarlet thread, bright against the stone, and tied it firmly in place, a mark of faith. 3 days later, the spies returned to Joshua. "Truly, the Lord has given the land into our hands," they reported. "All the inhabitants melt with fear." The time had come. The priests lifted the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest overlaid with gold, containing the tablets of the law, the symbol of God's presence. They stepped toward the raging Jordan. The waters roared. They did not hesitate. The moment their feet touched the river's edge, the current halted. Upstream, the waters gathered in a heap near a distant town. Downstream, the riverbed dried. Gasps rippled through the people.
40,000 armed men crossed first, then families. Children clutched their mothers' hands, eyes wide at the miracle beneath their feet. Livestock shuffled across damp earth that moments earlier had surged with floodwaters. In the center, the priests stood unmoving, bearing the ark until the last Israelite reached the opposite bank. Joshua commanded 12 men, one from each tribe, to carry stones from the river's heart and stack them at Gilgal. "When your children ask what these stones mean," he said, "tell them the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord." Memory would anchor future faith. When the priests stepped onto dry land, the river surged back to flood stage. Terror swept through Canaan.
Yet before a single sword was drawn, God commanded something unexpected. "Make flint knives." Joshua obeyed. An entire generation born in the wilderness had not received the covenant sign given to Abraham. Before conquest, there must be consecration. On the open plains within sight of Jericho's walls, Israel's fighting men submitted to circumcision. For days they lay recovering, vulnerable and exposed. Jericho could have attacked. It did not. When healing came, the Lord said, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." They called the place Gilgal, rolling. There they celebrated Passover. They ate unleavened bread and roasted grain grown from Canaan's soil. The next morning, the manna ceased. 40 years of daily miracle ended. The land would now sustain them. Then Joshua went out alone near Jericho. As he surveyed the walls, a man stood before him with a drawn sword. Joshua approached without flinching. "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" "Neither," the figure replied. "I am the commander of the army of the Lord." Joshua fell face down. This battle belonged to heaven. "Remove your sandals," the commander said. "The place where you stand is holy." The plan was revealed. For 6 days, Israel would march around the city once in silence. 7 priests would blow ram's horn trumpets before the ark. On the 7th day, they would circle 7 times. No war cry, no taunts, no words, just obedience. Day after day, Jericho's defenders watched in confusion as the procession circled their city. Armed men marched, priests blew haunting notes on shofars, the ark gleamed in the sun. Silence pressed against stone. On the 7th day, they rose at dawn, 1 circuit, 2, 3. Dust clung to sandals, trumpets echoed against the walls. By the 7th circuit, tension crackled like dry timber before a flame. The priests blew a long, sustained blast. Joshua lifted his voice, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." The silence of 6 days shattered in a single roar, and the walls collapsed. Stone buckled, towers split, dust engulfed the sky. Every man charged straight ahead. Amid ruin and smoke, Joshua remembered one promise: find Rahab. The 2 spies raced through debris toward the section where her house had stood. The scarlet cord still hung in the window. Inside, Rahab and her family huddled together, alive. They were led safely outside the camp. Jericho burned. Its treasures of metal were placed in the Lord's treasury. Everything else was destroyed. Joshua pronounced a curse upon the ruins. Centuries later, when a man rebuilt that city, the curse claimed his sons just as spoken. But Rahab lived. She entered Israel not as a captive, but as one redeemed by faith. In time, she married a man named Salmon. They had a son named Boaz, kind, righteous Boaz, who would one day redeem a widowed foreigner named Ruth. From their line came Obed, then Jesse, then David, shepherd and king. Generations later, from David's lineage, in a humble town called Bethlehem, a child was born, Jesus of Nazareth. Rahab's name appears in his genealogy. A woman once defined by shame became woven into the story of salvation. Jericho fell because it feared but would not submit. Rahab was saved because she heard and believed. The scarlet cord that marked her window fluttered in the wind as walls crumbled around it, a quiet testimony that faith, not heritage, secures a future. Obedience brought victory. Courage carried a nation forward, and grace reached into a pagan city to rescue one woman who dared to trust the living God. The walls of Jericho turned to dust, but the faith of Rahab echoes still.